Does this house look familiar? Does it look like something from your teenage dreams? Supposedly tucked away under near perpetual cloud cover in Forks, Washington, surrounded by immortal vampires and protective werewolves, it was the home of Bella Swan and her father, Officer Charlie Swan, from Stephenie Meyer's Twilight Saga. It was here that Edward watched Bella sleep, where Bella and Edward shared their first kiss, and where Bella slept the night before her wedding, which changed her life forever. But this was in fact one family's home for many years, which has some remarkable connections to the Twilight films. This home is actually located in St. Helens, Oregon, about 225 miles south of Forks, Washington. It was built in 1935 and features 4 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, and 2,500 square feet. Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, and Taylor Lautner did in fact film some scenes from the first movie in this house, before a few different replicas were built for later films. Some pieces of furniture remain, including the dining room table, as well as the paint colors chosen by the production team, who chose this home because of its original details. But long before Hollywood arrived to film a series that would captivate a generation, this was the home of Claude and Marie Poff and their 2 sons, Philip and David. Claude Poff was born in Oregon in 1891. He married Catherine Minnie Palmer on May 24, 1913. In 1917, Claude was drafted into World War I. His draft card describes him as being medium build with light blue eyes and light brown hair. In 1918, as Edward turned immortal after succumbing to the Spanish flu, Claude was actively serving in the army in World War I. In fact, it is said that the flu outbreak spread quickly because of the war, as it struck young, healthy individuals. Claude survived his time in battle, but the war must have been too much for the young couple, as Claude and Minnie were divorced in 1919 on the grounds of cruelty. Legally, divorce on the grounds of cruelty can be in the form of physical or verbal abuse, or simply avoiding the shared residence. It is impossible to know exactly what transpired between Claude and Minnie, or how much the war may have affected Claude and contributed to the downfall of his marriage. But Claude would remain single for over a decade. In 1930, Claude and Marie Louise Walker were living blocks away from each other in St. Helens. Claude worked in a furniture store while Marie was working as a legal clerk in a law office. Marie had previously worked as a teacher at the Chemawa Indian School, a Native American boarding school which still operates today. Perhaps Jacob had some friends or relatives who attended Chemawa. Let me know in the comments if you are Team Edward or Team Jacob. Somewhere in St. Helens, Claude and Marie crossed paths and came to be married on February 16, 1931 in Port Angeles, Washington, the same city where Edward rescued Bella from a gang of thugs and where they had their first date. Port Angeles is minutes from Forks, but over 200 miles from St. Helens, so it is fascinating that both relationships truly began here. Claude and Marie welcomed their first child, Philip, on July 31, 1932. This house was built in 1935, right in the middle of the Great Depression. At a time when so many could barely afford to eat, Claude and Marie likely built this home, and it was likely here that they welcomed their second son, David, in January 1936. In December 1936, less than a year after David's birth, Marie attended a women's legal fraternity luncheon. It is interesting that Maria was a working mother at a time when it was far less common, likely because she attended 2 years of college and had a good-paying job as a legal clerk, which also allowed the family to move into this home at such a difficult time in history. By 1940, the family had a live-in housekeeper, and Marie's Aunt Carrie also lived with them. Claude worked in a sawmill, and Marie continued at the legal office. Philip and David seemingly had a quiet, traditional upbringing. Both were involved in Boy Scouts and sports and graduated from St. Helens High School. Philip went on to serve in the Korean War, while David served in the Vietnam War. Both went on to have successful careers, get married, and have children. The most notable connection to Twilight comes in 1950, when Claude was listed as working as a city police officer. That's right, Claude was the real-life Charlie, working as a cop in the small town in the Pacific Northwest. What's more, Claude's father John was the chief of police in the nearby town of St. John's. There are no mentions of Claude's work as a police officer in newspapers, and I so wish that I could have found photographs of Claude or Marie, But the high school photos of their sons and Claude's World War I draft description of light blue eyes and light brown hair is all we have to imagine what they may have looked like. Claude passed away in 1971 at the age of 80. Marie lived on until 1987 when she passed away at the age of 89. They both lived in St. Helens until their death, presumably in this home. Now you can experience this home yourself, as it has become a popular Airbnb featuring many unique details from the films. I will include a link in the description. And perhaps as you live out your Twilight fantasies, you may recall the Poffs, who shared many Christmases in this living room, prepared many meals in this kitchen, and whose real-life love story also began in Port Angeles, continuing for many years in this home as Claude served and protected the city of St. Helens.